Scott about Avant, and she's going to be speaking with us today about Buzzed About Bees. And Denise grew up in the Modesto area, attended local schools, including 2 years at MJC, of which she was very proud. Also attended San Francisco State, and she received a bachelor's degree from Stanislaus State in biology, and also her teaching credential there as well. In terms of her career in science and education, she was senior lab technician at Shell Lab doing microbiology and plant physiology research. Also program coordinator at the Great Valley Museum. She taught biology labs at Sci Col. Editor for Science Publishing Company, writing and editing biology labs, and an anatomy and physiology lab technician here at MJC. Since retiring, she hasn't slowed down at all. In fact, anything she's sped up. She's a docent at the Great Valley Museum. She became a master gardener in 2020, and she's also on the
Yeah, some of my fellow master gardeners are here.
She's also on the Science Colloquium Committee as well, and has many other interests, some of which include traveling, hiking, yoga. She also is interested in discussing her journey of being born profoundly deaf, getting cochlear implants, and teaching others how to protect their hearing, and options for them if they become hearing impaired. So I also need to mention that there is a QR code for faculty Flex if you need that, and if it's tough to get the picture of it off the screen, I do have a hard copy up here in the front. Come up and get that later. So that said, I'm going to hand this off.
Thank you, Heidi. And by the way, Heidi is going to be the speaker, not the next one, but the one after that. And it's going to be a really cool one on John Napier, a Scottish mathematician. And Heidi and I share this love of Scotland. I have family in Scotland. So he was a really interesting guy. So I hope you guys come for that. Okay, so let's get started with my talk. Before I do, a couple of things. For those of you who are not master gardener, I'm wearing my master gardener vest, by the way. If you're interested, and I'll be giving more information at the end, you're interested in getting information on master gardener and being connected to their talks and information. Anyway, go ahead and sign this. And I do have things up here, flyers and information on beneficial plant for pollinators, beneficial insects, and insecticide, beneficial predators. So there's a bunch of interesting stuff up there. Okay, so let me go back. Oh, wrong way. Okay, so where am I going here?
Denise, as I came here, we passed somebody that looked like they were selling tickets for a garden show. You know, I think in Modesto.
The home garden show.
The home garden show. That's something you said before that.
Okay, where did you see that, Robin?
On Stanford.
Okay. Okay.
That's what they have at the Civic Center every year, you know.
Oh, it might be the home and garden show. Yeah, that could be it. Yeah, they were having it at the downtown conference center. Yeah, it could be there. Yeah, so I don't know. Okay, all right. So Buzzed About Bees. But before I do that, let's talk about master gardeners because I'm representing them today. And for those of you who don't know, we extend research-based knowledge and information on home horticulture, pest management, and sustainable landscape practices. I do want to emphasize, while master gardener, we are very knowledgeable, that we go through a 18-week course, and we cover an enormous amount of topics. Our little brain can't hold it all. We are volunteers, but we are not experts, knowledgeable, not experts. At the end of the program, if you have a question that I cannot answer, I will try to find out the answer for you. I might get some help from my fellow master gardeners. Before I start the talk, a few days ago, a friend of mine sent me this. many of us are sad about, my heritage, as I said, is from Scotland. Many of us are very sad about Queen Elizabeth II passing. We all knew it was coming, but still, the royal beekeeper informed Buckingham Palace bee that the Queen had died. And I've heard of this. There was a time when many rural British families had a beehive. The custom of telling the bee may have its origin in Celtic mythology, which held that bees were the link with the spiritual world. So if you had a message you wanted to pass on to your dearly departed loved one, you went out to your beehive and you told the bee, Queen Elizabeth II has passed. And that will get passed on. And so the message will get passed on. So yeah, so they would tell them about birth, marriages, death, and long absences. And somebody went off on a journey, but they will be back, that kind of thing. So I thought that was, for me, that was kind of a heartwarming story. Okay, so some of the things we're going to be talking about, importance of bee anatomy, life cycle and stages, bee facts, types of bees and their habits, bees in trouble, and how can we help? But first of all, what are pollinators? Pollinators are anything that helps carry pollen from the male part of the flower, the stamen, to the female part of the same or another flower, the stigma. This transfer is necessary for the plant to be fertilized in order to produce fruit, seed, and new plants. And of course, bees are one of the most important pollinators. Okay, if I remember where my pointer is, right there. Okay. So what's the buzz about bees? There's over 20,000 species worldwide, over 4,000 in the US and 1,600 here in California. They're the only insect that produces food that we can eat. 130 fruits and vegetables depend upon bee pollination. 35% of the world's food requires pollination. Honeybees pollinate 90% of California's almond crop. This is what your grocery store would look like without bees. Bring it now in the produce section, somewhat empty. And of course, bees produce honey and pollen and beeswax for candles and so forth. So, okay, take a look at this. Take a look at this. How many of these are bees? I'll give you a moment and then I'll give you the answer. Okay, number one is a fly. Number two is a bumblebee. So that's a bee. Number three, of course, is a butterfly. Number four is a sweat bee. Number five, a grasshopper. Number six is a mining bee. I'm sorry. Yeah, I always get them mixed up. And then number seven down here is a mason bee. Number eight is the honeybee, and this is another sweat bee. Yeah, so we got two sweat bees here. There's a sweat bee and this is a metallic green sweat bee. So this is one of the things that I've been in love with bees for many years, but as a master gardener, I'm learning a lot more about bees, and I'm still in the process of learning to identify them, what I see in my garden. So yeah, so I hope this will help inspire you to look in your gardens and learn what's out there too. Bee anatomy. They have three body parts: the head, the abdomen, and the thorax. So you can see here the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. Okay, let me back up again. Okay, so it has a hard exoskeleton that is on the outside of its body with holes for breathing. The head has an antenna, eyes, and mouth part. The antenna has receptors which help communicate, see, smell, hear, move around the world. A bee has 5 eyes. They have 3 small eyes at the top of their head and two large compound eyes on either side of their head. And part of their head too, they have their mouth, including a proboscis, which is a long, hairy, straw-like mouth part used to feed on liquid. And you can see that proboscis right here. And then they also have mandibles right here, which are two movable jaws, but they move, they swing back and forth. They're not up and down like ours. And they're used for eating pollen and work wax in comb building. And here's some close-ups of their eyes. And here you can also see the mandible here and here. And then through the eyes of a bee on the left is what we would see. On the right is what they see. And what you're seeing here is looks like a highway, a road, telling them this is where the nectar is. Like humans, bees are trichromatic, meaning they possess 3 independent color receptors. Humans pick up, however, green, blue, and red light waves, where bees are most sensitive to blue, green, and ultraviolet. So they cannot see red or red shade very well. They're more attracted to the lavender blue shade. They'll still fly to red flowers, just there may be UV marking or stripe, like I was showing you, that act as landing marker, or they're attracted to the scent. And the antenna is also on the head, and they feature odor receptor. So that's not the only part of a bee's anatomy that can detect odors. In the antenna alone, bees pack a whopping 170 odor receptors, giving them an extremely evolved sense of smell. They have no ears, but they can hear through their antenna. The thorax is in the middle part, hold the wings and legs. All insects have 6 legs, but only some insects have wings. Bees have 2 pair of wings, or 4 wings total. The abdomen is usually the largest part of an insect. In insects like bees, the finger is found at the end of the abdomen. But only worker bees have a finger, which they use to protect themselves when they feel threatened. Some fun bee facts. A bee's wings beat 190 times a second. That's 11,400 times a minute. They have 2 separate stomachs, one for food and the other just for nectar. A pound of honey is made by 2 million flower visits. The bees fly 50,000 miles back and forth to bring that honey. And we're talking mainly honeybees here. Each colony smells different to bees. This is so they can tell where they live. Another bee fun fact. Research has learned that bees sleep and rest at night, 5 to 7 hours. And here we have, sometimes bees don't get back to the hive or their nest in time when it gets dark. So they'll find, so they will find a flower to spend the night at. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about these bees in a little bit, but these are sleeping longhorn bees. Myth versus fact. Bees live in hives. Only 10% of the world's 20,000 bee species are social, living in hives. In North America, only the European honeybee and bumblebee build hives and live in colonies. All bees make honey. Only, sort of true, but only honeybees make enough honey to harvest. Other bees make only enough for themselves. Bees die after they sing. Only honeybees do, because they have a barbed stinger. And what you see in the picture, it's kind of gross, but it's kind of cool too. That's the barb sticking in somebody's arm, and the bee flying away, that's its gut. That's connected to that barb. The bee is going to be dead very soon. So, yeah, so Like many insects, bees go through a complete metamorphosis. And complete metamorphosis means the larva stage is very different, looks very different from the adult stage. Incomplete metamorphosis, like crickets and grasshoppers, they look the same, they're just tiny. So complete metamorphosis, all the stages are different. So the queen bee lays, queen bee lays the egg, and then larva for 6, 10, 15 days, becomes a pupa here at day 15, and finally around day 21, you have an adult working its way out. And now there are 3 basically types of bees between for the more social bees like bumblebees and honeybees. They have the queen, workers, and males. And you can see what the difference between them from the honeybee queen compared to the bumblebee, workers, and finally the male drones. Yeah, okay, and there's only 1 queen, but you can see there's usually quite a few workers and not that many drones. Okay, 1 queen runs the whole hive, or the honeybee queen, and you can see her, she's been marked here by her beekeeper. Her job is to lay the eggs, that's all she does. A strong queen can lay up to 1,000 eggs or more a day, and up to 2,500 eggs a day in the summer. She can last as long as 6 years. She also produces chemicals that guide the behavior of the other bees. So she's pretty important. Worker bees are all female. They do all the work in the hive, and they have many different jobs according to their age. A worker bee takes about 21 days, as you saw a moment ago, during metamorphosis from egg to adult, and they live about 6 weeks. During this time, she'll produce about a 12th of a teaspoon of honey. So next time you buy a jar of honey, think about all the bees that were involved in making this. Worker bees are the only ones that you see flying away from the hive. Okay, let's talk about the worker bee life. They hatch, from the time they hatch to 12 days, they are called house bees. They clean the nest for the first 2 days of their lives as adults. When they're 3 to 12 days, they work as nurses, caring for the hive brood. Their job is to feed the larva royal jelly and then honey and pollen. From 12 to 21 days, they're construction workers. They build and repair the cells of the nest. From 18 to 21 days, they become guards, protecting the hive from enemies and invaders. They also inspect any bee that comes into the hive to make sure they're not from another colony. How they know this, how they know how to shift from one job to the next, is somewhat of a mystery still. And I mentioned earlier, the queen produces chemicals, and somehow these chemicals, cause these changes to happen, presumably. But a lot of it still really don't know. And then finally, for 22 to 42 days, the oldest of the worker bees are called foragers. They leave the hive and they will be collecting the pollen and bringing it back. I'm sorry, collecting the nectar and bringing it back, and the pollen too. This is the last job they will have before they die. They have a very important job of gathering nectar and pollen. The drones, the males, they're bigger than the worker bee, but smaller than the queen. They're lazy. All they do is eat and mate with the queen. That's when the queen leaves the hive, where they need a new queen. For the rest of the time, they're pretty much doing nothing. Drones hatch in the spring and are kicked out by worker bees before the winter months because they don't want to have to feed them. There's a limited supply of food, and we don't need you. They kick them out. and they're going to die. So, life can be harsh. Okay, honeybees, of course, are the most well-known of all social bees, native to Europe. Estimated 2.4 million colonies in the US, 2/3 of which travel the country each year in those traveling hives, producing honey and beeswax. You've all seen them during almond season, early in the spring and late in the winter, early spring. All these hives start showing up around the almond orchards. More than 1 million colonies are used to produce the state almond crop. They may forage up to 2 to 5 miles from their hive. They use the waggle gas. Honeybees are the only ones that do this. They share information about the best food sources. When the worker returns to the hive, it moves around in the figure 8 and waggles its body to indicate the source and direction of the food. Pretty cool. Okay, give me a moment here. Making honey. Nectar is extracted from flowers using the bee's long tube-shaped tongue called the proboscis and is stored in an extra stomach or crop. Remember I mentioned they have 2 stomachs. When a honeybee returns to the hive, it passes the nectar to another bee. This process is repeated until the partially digested nectar is finally deposited into a honeycomb. But it's still watery. So to get all that extra water out of the honey, the bee sets to work, the worker bee sets to work fanning the honeycomb with their wings to speed up the process of evaporation. When most of the water has evaporated, the bee seals the comb with a liquid from its abdomen, which eventually hardens into beeswax. It's also incredibly complicated, isn't it? Little tiny. Okay, different kinds of bees. Social versus solitary bees. The social bees, of course, the 2 best examples are the honeybee and the bumblebee. Solitary bee examples, mason bee and leafcutter bees. This is just the difference between honeybees and bumblebees. They're both social, but they're very different. They have 2 different genuses, apis and bombas. Honeybees are smaller, thinner. Bumblebees are bigger, fuzzier. Honeybees live in hives with thousands, sometimes tens of thousands, where bumblebees will just have a few hundred, 200 to 400. Honeybees can be domesticated. There are some that live out in the wild, but they can be domesticated. Bumblebees, you can't. And they produce honey only for themselves. For honeybees, as we know, produce for others like us and bears and whatever. Their colonies survive winter intact. Only the queen survives winter for bumblebee. They're not as good pollinators. Honeybees are not as good pollinators as bumblebees. Honeybees are less resistant to heat, cold, and rain than bumblebees. Already mentioned the waggle gas. So honeybees are superb communicators. They sting only once before dying. Where bumblebees, their stinger does not have barbs on it, so they can sting multiple times. Honeybees will swarm. Bumblebees don't. Okay, some more different bees. Generalist bees are bees that go to many different types of flowers. So the bumblebee is very generalist. So is the mason bee. And most native bees are generalists. But there are some specialists, like the squash bee that obviously only goes to squash plants. So if you're growing squash in your backyard, you want me to see one of these guys, along with the generalist and sunflower bees. Native bees, over 1,600 species in California. Most are solitary, do not build hives, do not produce honey or wax for consumption by others. Native bees are 200 times more efficient at pollination than honeybees. For example, pollinating an acre of apples requires 60,000 to 120,000 honeybees. The same area can be pollinated between about 250 to 750 mason bees. So yeah, so it's kind of interesting. And you see some different bees down here, the yellow-faced bumblebee, male sweat bee, and male carpenter, valley carpenter bee, and those are all native bees. Solitary bee, a lot of them. Cuckoo bee, digger bee, carpenter bee, leaf color bee, and there's some cool pictures here. Oops, sorry, wrong way, I keep hitting the wrong thing. Different, from leaf color bee cutting out it and flying off, holding on to it. So when you see, sometimes we think when we see our plant in our yard, looks like they've been eaten by something, if it's very clean like this and circular, it's probably a leaf color bee, not some other insect. And then this bright colored one is the a sweat bee. Bee nesting, there's 3 basic types. Ground nesting, about 70% of them, they live in the ground. That's where they nest. That includes mining bees. Stem and wood nesting, 30%. The leaf color bee, the mason bee. Hive nesting, only less than 1%. That's about honeybees and the bumblebees. Mason bees construct nests from mud. Leaf color bees use a wrapper of leaves, of resin and sand. Some bees may dig nest tunnels in sunny patches of bare ground. Others seek out abandoned beetle burrows in dead tree trunks or branches. And here's some examples. You can see a ground bee here, carpenter bee, honeybees in the wild, and here's that leaf color bee that's wrapped itself in all those little pieces of leaves that it cut out. So, bees in your backyard. Of course, we're all familiar with the honeybees, and we probably can usually spot bumblebees too. But here's some others: carpenter bee, sweat bee, and longhorn bees. Okay, carpenter bee. Females are shiny and black and can't sting, but they really have to be provoked. Males are golden and can't sting. Males are quite pretty. Sweat bee. Females are metallic green. And they can be often mistaken for some like bottle flies or also this iridescent green. Something might, if you're not looking too closely, you might mistake them. Males are metallic green with a striped abdomen. And like the one here on the right. Longhorn bees that I mentioned earlier. Females have a nest. Males are the ones that have to sleep outside. So, but as I mentioned earlier, there are bees that don't make it back to their nesting place at night sometimes, and they will sleep on flowers. But what you're seeing here are males who don't have a nest. Bees are disappearing all around the world. The cause is not obvious or simple. Researchers think several factors are contributing. Pesticides are a possible reason. Chemicals meant to kill harmful insect diseases that damage crops could accidentally harm the bees. Loss of bees habitat. We're building homes, a farm, no place to live, no food to eat, no flowers. Other threats include climate change, which threatens all life here on Earth. It could cause flowers to bloom before the bees will come out of hibernation. If some plants are finished blooming, the bees will not have as much to eat. And poor nutrition can make bees less able to fend off diseases. Disease and infection. Certain harmful mites, fungi, and viruses have affected many bees. Invasive species. These are mostly plants that have taken over natural food nesting sources. So, to help, plant bee-friendly flowers. If you want flowers that are full of nectar, native plants tend to have more nectar than some of the nursery plants. You want brightly colored petals that are usually blue or yellow or a mixture of these, because remember, bees don't see red. Something that is aromatic or has a minty fake fragrance, they're attracted to that. Open in the daytime. The thing that are white flowers are often open at nighttime. Those attract moths. You want tubular flowers, but you also want flowers that are flat, provide landing platforms so they can rest. And then, as I mentioned, the tubular flower provide a variety of plants so that there's something in your garden that is blooming every season. So there's always something out there for them to feed on. If you can, reduce pesticide in your garden. Within UC, through the UC system, they have something called IPM, Integrated Pest Management. And you can see the website right here. This is a wonderful site to go to for information. If you have an issue in your garden and you're trying to figure out what it is, and if you want to learn more about pesticides, this is a good place to go to too. And I do have something up here too on about IPM and some less toxic pesticides. Avoid broad spectrum pesticides. Now, those are things that kill everything, and including the beneficial insects. Try to figure out what the problem is, and I'll give you a source for help in a moment. Try to figure out what the problem is and get a pesticide that targets only that. When purchasing plants, ensure the grower does not use neonicotinoid, I always have trouble saying that word, neonicotinoid chemicals, which are systemic. Systemic means it's taken up by the root through the entire plant. So that makes the entire plant toxic. Leaves, stems, the flower, the nectar, all of that. And if you do use a pesticide, choose one that's less toxic, such as floriculture oil or insecticidal soap. Follow the instructions. Spray early in the morning, evening hour when pollinators are not around. And here's a little bit more on the neonicotinoid. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency has developed pesticide labels that prohibit use of some of these products when bees are present. You can help bees by providing water. Puddles can attract honeybees and bumblebees that will sip water and extract minerals of salt from the soil. Bee baths are easy to make and can provide many species with a place to get a drink and clean off. But remember, change the water frequently because we do have mosquitoes. That's always something to keep in mind. Provide a nesting habitat for bees. Just have some bare spots here and there in your garden. Quite often, people see these little holes in their garden and they assume it's ants. And not always ants. Quite often, it is a bee that is living in the ground. So, you'll probably have them in maybe hidden out of the way spots in your garden. A stump or a standing log can make a good house for some bees, like mason bees. What do you do if you see a swarm? Doesn't happen often. One of my friends just recently had a swarm at her house, and she contacted me, and I told her what to do, and that means leave it alone, basically. Call a professional to come and remove the bees, and they will relocate them to a new home. Sometimes the bees will leave on their own after a few days, that they're in the process of moving to setting up a new hive, and they might need a break to rest. And scout bees are going around looking. And unfortunately, they picked your place to do that. And the bee, thank you. But now there's a little bit more before I wrap things up here. So if you have a garden question, the master gardener has a helpline. And we have 2 people here who do the helpline a lot. From 9 to 12 on Wednesday, there's always a body there to answer the phone. And the phone number is right there. You can drop a sample off at any time at the Ag Center, which is way out there at Crow's Landing and Service Road. That's the building. Go in that building. Or you can go online and fill out a form. And somebody will get back to you within 5 business days with information for you, hopefully the answer to your problem and what you can do. You can follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and that's why I mentioned there's a sign-up sheet if you want to get involved in order to receive these things. We have a website called, a blog called Sci Col, which comes out most weeks, and it has some very fun, interesting articles. Subscribe to our YouTube because we have lots of programs there. And we also have lots of workshops. There's one coming up. Isn't there one coming up on fall vegetables or something? No?
Composting.
Composting, that's it. Okay. Yeah. So, oh, that's right. No, compost. Okay. So, yeah. So, if you're interested in composting, we have that. And the information will be on the website. And then the Santa Claus sprout that I just mentioned. So, well, that's the sort of faculty thing. And that's it. So, any questions? Go ahead.
Denise, when the bees swarm, is that the old queen that's leading the bees that were her helpers?
Sometimes, yeah. But sometimes it's a new queen. But usually, yeah, sometimes it's the new, usually it's a new queen. Yeah,
So the old queen keeps the nest, but
yeah.
she knows to
Mhm.
make
The hive,
another,
the reason
queen.
for that is the hive getting too crowded, and being too successful in propagating. And so a good number of the bees will leave. Yeah, the old queen might still be fertile, still producing eggs, but it's just getting too crowded and there's not enough food for everybody. So a group of them, for the decision that they just leave with the drones, because the drones need to mate with that new queen, who at that point is not fertile until that happens. Yeah.
So when the hive gets crowded, the queen senses it and lays a queen egg,
Mm-hmm.
which ripens. And does she modify the worker eggs and stuff to go with the new queen, or?
That is good question. Yeah, I don't even know if anybody knows that question, answer to that. Yeah. So
What they
that's-
do is she'll lay eggs, but just like any other, but it's what they call the royal.
yeah, the royal jelly. Somehow they're
It's a heavier concentrate of minerals, and the worker bees will feed multiple bees this jelly. And the first queen that comes out of that, before she takes off either to ward off the old queen or to leave, she'll go around now and kill the other queens that are in the process of.
emerging. Yeah. Uh-huh. So I'm out. I got here first. Yeah.
It's like humans.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah, I forgot about that. Thank you. So, okay, way in the back.
Yeah, I planted some beautiful lavender. It's a huge spray of it now. And I like to use it for culinary purposes. But the bees, there's so many bees, like every bee in Stanislaus County.
They do like lavender.
You know,
Mhm.
they get there and then the lavender, the flowers are gone by the time they're finished. Is there like a time of day? that I
Early in
can
the morning.
sneak out?
Early in the morning. Yeah.
Early.
Exactly. Yeah. Early in the morning or late in the evening. Yeah, that by then the bees have either not arrived or they departed for the evening. Yeah, that's the time to gather them. Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, anything else?
So,
Mhm.
you mentioned about having standing water for bees. But what about mosquitoes?
Well, that's why I mentioned, yeah, you need to change it regularly so that you don't get mosquitoes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Change it a lot.
Just need to change it a lot. Yeah. No, every day, every other day, definitely every other day. Because I think mosquitoes, something like they lay eggs, they hatch in but very short amount of time. Don't quote me on that. I think it's like 3 days. Very quick, 3 to 5 days. So yeah, you need to change it frequently. Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah. You don't want that standing water. Mosquitoes can lay eggs in less than a teaspoon of water. So yeah. So yeah. So you want to be on the lookout for that, definitely. So, so, okay, Arnold?
Denise, have you found information on the mix of bees in regards to their increasing the population?
Okay, say that one more time, Arnold.
Have you found any information on whether bees are decreasing in population?
Oh, they're definitely decreasing. Yeah, they're definitely inferior to all bee populations are decreasing. Yeah.
Number, percentages?
It depends upon the bee. Bill, you want to add to that?
Our 2020 class, master gardener class, had a classman who finished. He's a beekeeper. He was very young. Armando was his name, and the problem he mentioned was mites.
Right.
Dealing with mites. Mites were a problem for his bee that he kept. Not so much climate, and not so much loss of habitat or pesticides. Mites.
Okay, but that was for the hive.
Yes.
Yeah, the hive, but not for the honeybees.
Once your hive has been infested, then you can wipe out your whole business.
Sometimes that's beekeeping practice.
Yeah, that's true. Well, you have to think about it. These hives get moved from place to place to place.
Yes,
And then every time they move, there's an adjustment period. They're in a new place. They have to figure out where they are, where the food sources are. And we're not always put in the best area in terms of temperature and shelter. And, you know, that really is not a health, in a lot of ways, it's not a healthy environment for honeybees. Yeah, and, you know, there are some beekeepers that are changing their practices and not moving their bees. They might move them around and within, say, a few miles within this area, instead of trucking them from one end of the country to the other type of thing. Yeah, yeah. So, yeah. But, yeah, no. Yeah, but good question, Arnold. But yeah, all bees are in trouble. Yeah, some are more in trouble than others. Yeah, Rhonda? Yeah.
Honestly, very few bumblebees in the yard.
Yeah. So, yeah, so, okay, so, if, you know, for those of you who are master gardeners, if you want to get on to our list, there's a sign up sheet. And then here's some, you know, information you can take with you if you like. And I thank you all for coming, particularly my fellow master gardeners who helped out here. Yeah, come back in 2 weeks and listen to the talk on almonds. I think that's gonna be a good one. Yeah, yeah.